What is some of your what do you credit with your success, and what is some of your advice just very generally for other investors?
I mean, I think being open-minded and malleable is truly important. Again, I think particularly in investing, people want to have these models or these philosophies that are concrete and tried and true. And the reality, if you really gauge the history of our industry, whether it's LTCM or others, is there's a periodic occurrence of companies that are on top of the world and they're geniuses, and then 5 or 10 years later they're completely obsolete. And I think, given in my views what we've talked about in the latter half of this interview, if you believe the world is changing, it's really important. I went to a liberal arts university, so I just believe liberal arts and the ability to construct arguments and think about things critically and reach conclusions, but also, as Druckenmiller kind of always talked about as well, the ability to adapt and change is important. So what's the quote, like, strong convictions held loosely, something along those lines. I think being competitive, at least if you want to be, in the professional investment game, again, in terms of quotes that I find interesting, Richard Driehaus, one of my favorite quotes of his was, he would just say, "Hey, if you don't want to win, don't worry, you won't." And I think there's a lot of truth to that, where it's you've got to kind of get the elbow grease, and you have to be both competitive and, I think, psychologically a little bit off to be a great investor, because essentially you're going up against extremely smart people with firmly held and generally pretty well substantiated opinions, and the ability to sort of have conviction in the face of that is really challenging. So yeah, I think those are probably the big ones. I think the last thing, and kind of going back to another Druckenmiller, but he talks a lot about how the best investment managers he's ever met are hyper fixated on their failures and sort of come with a healthy dose of humility. And there's so many arrogant people in this industry, and so yeah, I think if you are competitive, and if your true interest really is being the best investor, rather than the paycheck or the number of houses you can acquire, something along those lines. I think I'd like to think of how I am. Like, the successes are great, but the pain, it's like the emotions of like loss versus winning. I mean, the emotions that intensity I get from losing or failure is significantly more than my successes. And I think you sort of need to have that mindset in order to persist in this industry for a long time. So I think those are probably the key things I would mention. I think lastly, something I realized belatedly, and you've been helpful in this too, is casting as wide of a net as possible, and really building out your network. I mean, some advice I even give, particularly to young kind of college graduates, is that I'm just like blown away by how much great content there is available for free now through newsletters and podcasts such as this, and conferences that are available on YouTube. There's like an abundance of knowledge that wasn't available 20 years ago. So I think capitalizing on that and exploiting that is beneficial as well.